This is Pod Populi, podcast for the people.
Hey there, and welcome to the Cinnamon Effect podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this vibrant journey of discovery and growth. This podcast is your go-to space for embracing intention, where you'll find clarity on your unique path, deepen those meaningful connections, and unleash your creativity like never before. We'll explore how to build unshakable confidence and celebrate the beauty of gratitude, all while savoring the calm that consistency brings to our lives. Thank you for being with me. Let's sprinkle a little cinnamon into your day and make life sweeter, healthier, and more fulfilling. Welcome back to the Cinnamon Effect. I'm Kimberly Hand, and today I am here with Kristi McVee. Kristi McVee is a child safety and prevention educator helping parents and caregivers keep their kids safe from abuse. This is a topic that we've never talked about here on my podcast, but I came across your account on Instagram and I really thought this was something so important. And the piece of content that I actually saw of yours was talking about sleepovers and how they are not, that you think they are not good. And I agree with you. I was like, oh my gosh, finally someone is talking about this, because I do think it's something that a lot of parents just think it's no big deal, and no judgment on that. And everyone has their own choice. But my son is 9. He's never been to a sleepover. And so this was something that I really wanted to discuss with you. And we're also going to get into a lot of other things. You were a police officer, specialist child interviewer, and child abuse detective for 10 years in Western Australia. I have to mention you're here. It's 8 p.m. your time, 8 a.m. our time. And so I'm so excited that you made the time to come on. I really appreciate it. So we're going to dive into all of this. And I want to start by saying that the statistic that you said was 1 in 4 children will be sexually abused by the time they are 18 years old. That's shocking to me. Absolutely shocking. So what you have to say today is so important for all of us, parents, grandparents, caregivers, everyone. So thank you, Kristi, for being here.
Thank you, Kimberly. Yeah, we had a bit of struggle to try and work out time zones, but we made it. We made it.
And I said I totally relied on you for that, because I get confused just between like time zones here in the United States. So I was like, you've got to tell me when is a good time for you. So here we are.
Here we are. But yeah, thank you for having me. And I'm so glad that more podcasters and people are talking about this, because when I first started talking about this, seemed like no one was talking about it, but I'm starting to see the needle move and more people are talking more openly about these topics. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Yes. Yeah. And with 1 in 4 children will be affected by sexual abuse by the time they're 18. That's just a staggering statistic. So I want to know, like, where do we start? You have a book, actually, Operation Kids Safe. If you want to talk about the tips for children, for parents, what should parents be talking to their kids about at home? It starts with us, right?
100%. I think if I can give you a little bit of context as to why I wrote the book, it was because when I was in the police, and I was a specialist child interviewer, so I was trained to interview children and get their evidence for court. And so I would hear from the children the same kinds of stories or the same kinds of red flags and warning signs that I was just kept thinking, why aren't parents picking these things up? Why aren't they seeing them in the people that were grooming and abusing their children? And I had parents say to me, if I only had known what to watch out for, I would have been able to keep my child safe. So that's how the book kind of came about. When I left the police, I started thinking about those questions, and I couldn't really let go what I had learned and what I had seen. And a little bit more context to that is I was a parent of a toddler when I started in the police. My own daughter was only 2 years old when I became a police officer, 3 years old when I became a specialist child interviewer. And, everything that I teach in my book is what I did with her. There's lots of personal stories in there. But to explain a bit more about what the book's about, it goes through the 3 different types of abuse that I saw. So in-person abuse or intimate child sexual abuse, which is, over 90% of child sexual abuse in Australia anyway, is by someone known to the child. So it's not that stranger danger that we were taught when we were children. Mm-hmm. It's someone who is in the family. It's a family friend. It's, it can be another child, and it also can be, teachers and coaches and things like that. So that's pretty universal around the world. Most child sexual abuse is by someone known to the child. And then the second part to that is between 30 and 50% in Australia, and I'm sure it would be similar in most Western cultures, is by another child, 30 to 50% of child sexual abuse. And that's not necessarily because children are abusing children because they're evil or whatever. It can be, when I first started in the police, it was about children harming other children because they had abuse happen to them as well, and then they are acting out what's happened to them on other children. But towards the end of my career, I was seeing children harming other children who hadn't been physically abused, but they had been exposed to pornography. So we're seeing an increase in that type of abuse happening as we speak. And we see pages, on Instagram similar to mine where they talk about this, is that we're seeing an increase in this stuff. So that's the second type of, in second chapter, so to speak, in my book. But the third is about online abuse. And we know that our children are increasingly at risk of abuse, grooming, online grooming, sextortion, and all of these types of things through online usage or device usage. So I talk about all 3 of those, and then what to do if in the end of the book. So that's a little bit about my book. But your question was about the 1 in 4 children and how to sort of have these conversations with your kids. And it starts with body safety. And I don't know if you mentioned that, but body safety education, which actually was created, it's called, sometimes it's called protective behaviors in the US, but it's a program or a range of lessons basically to teach kids that, first of all, they have the right to feel safe at all times, and second of all, that they can speak with someone about anything. And it's through these body safety lessons, the early warning signs. As adults, we're not very good at listening to our gut or our intuition because we've been taught not to listen to it. In body safety, we talk to our kids about, how does it feel when I feel safe? How does it feel when I feel unsafe? And so giving them the language to identify, when I get butterflies in my tummy, or my knees are shaky, or when someone makes me feel unsafe, this is the warning signs I get. And then I can go tell someone, a safe person. So that's one of the many lessons that we teach them. We teach them secrets versus surprises. When a child is, because unfortunately secrets hide abuse. And that is one of the tools that groom abusers and groomers use to keep children compliant and to stop them from, exposing them. We teach kids that a secret, especially an unsafe secret, such as something that, there's no time frame around it, that you're not allowed to tell anyone else or not allowed to tell a safe person, and it makes you feel unsafe in your body, those early warning signs, then that's an unsafe secret. And that if anyone tries to get you to keep that secret, then we want to tell a safe person. We also help our kids identify safe people within their networks. So, who's someone who always listens and believes them, who will help them feel safe again, so identifying those people as well. So there's multiple lessons. I have lots of videos on that on my page, but I talk about body safety all the time. So there's lots to learn, lots to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have body safety cards, did I see?
Yeah. I created like these little, they're very simple. It's a very simple idea, but I guess it's because I've got years of training, 15 years of doing this work, in that I was able to simplify that for parents, to give them those little conversation starters, How does it feel when I feel safe? Oh, well, my heart is warm and my stomach, I feel warm and cozy and my heart gets bigger. What's it feel like to feel unsafe? So I've got all these little conversation starters to help parents from as little as 1 all the way up to 12 and to help them identify these feelings and to have that language.
I think it's amazing. And that communication is really the basis for this, communicating with your kids. I know when I talk to my 9-year-old, when I'll just open up the conversation and it's amazing what comes out. I mean, just about any topic in general. Yeah. So like to get them talking and thinking and saying, well, this is how it feels in my body. How does it feel in yours? Right. And like,
exactly.
Getting them to speak on that. Obviously, we hope we never have to get to that point, but just being aware. I think at school at some point, my son came home and he said, my body, my rules. He had that, which he was trying to use that in the context of not taking a shower. And I was like, okay, wait a second.
I love that.
It. But, just being armed with that. And I'm glad he has that knowledge, of my body, my rules.
And they all try that at one stage or another. They all try that. And then you say, yes, it is your body, your rules, but we do have some safety rules that around your hygiene and around your safety that we have to, so go on, get in the shower.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do you spin that as, well, there are certain things that we have to tell you to do, right?
Yeah. And safety should be for everyone in the family. It's not just their safety, it's for our safety. For instance, I have people ask me because their kids, especially toddlers, in that no stage where they're like no to everything and, don't want their nappy changed or their diaper changed or they don't want to, hold your hand crossing the road or whatever. Safety is for everyone. So if it's not, this is where we might step in and say, it's, your body, your rules until it affects your safety. And then I have to step in as your safe adult to help you with that. So therefore, you're going to, if it's not safe for everyone, we're not crossing the road until you hold my hand. If putting on your seatbelt, some kids really hate putting on their seatbelt, and I never had that problem with my daughter, but I've seen kids struggle with that. And, we don't move this car until everyone has their seatbelt on because it has to be safe for everyone in the car and you not having a seatbelt on. I know you can't really explain that to toddlers, but it's the kind of line that we have to go, also explaining to them always, their private parts, all the proper names for their private parts because people who abuse children can gamify their abuse to make children not realize that they're being abused. So we need to use proper names for private parts because if we don't use proper names, then there's the idea that they might gamify it. But also when children have to speak up to an adult or even a police officer when something's happened, then they don't feel confident talking about their private parts and sharing what's happened to their private parts. And I've had so many countless, child interviews where I've had to really push and push and push until the child actually explains what's happened or where it happened. They just kind of, and it just makes it harder for the child. And, we want them to be empowered. We want them to be, able to stand up for themselves. And believe it or not, for anyone listening, an empowered child with strong beliefs and know their body rights like your son, they are kryptonite. There was a research project in the Australian prison in Queensland where they basically asked child sex offenders, what was the reason that stopped you from committing the offence? That groomed the child or the family and they stopped the abuse before it actually happened. And it was because the child offered resistance. And the resistance could be saying no, could be saying that this is my body, you're not allowed to do that. This could be them, already going to a parent. So 84% of them said, resistance from the child, and then 16% said a protective parent. So when our children know their body safety rights and when they know what is appropriate and inappropriate, safe and unsafe, then it's kryptonite. Like no sex offenders out there trying to get caught. They don't want to be caught. So they're going to turn away from your child and go to the next one, basically.
Yeah. I've heard that specifically with a father. If the father is right there involved, maybe overbearing to a certain extent, like a sex offender will just completely lose interest and move on.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird to me when I hear that. Like it is the case, and I have seen videos of child sex offenders say that about fathers. But I find that mums and mothers are the most likely to teach this stuff, and they're the most likely to talk about this stuff with their kids. I don't see dads talking about it as much as I see mums. And I did a survey on my Instagram where, asked who does the most of the education around this, and it was something like 79% or nearly 80% of mums. It was, a small percentage of mums and dads together, and then like maybe less than 5% was dads. So we know that mums are the ones, or mothers are the ones doing most of this education, yet we're worried more about dads. I'd be more worried about myself. I'm like a mama bear about to, my daughter has said to friends before, and I guess, having a policing background, that makes it a bit different. But she said, you don't need to watch out for my dad. You need to watch out for my mom.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, I think that as well, and you're right about that. The moms are the ones that are doing more of the educating and the talking about it. So it's so important for us. As a child safety and prevention educator, why do you think sleepovers are bad? Is this an age appropriate thing? Like, I want you to dive into this a little bit more, the sleepover thing.
Yeah, so it's not, I don't think sleepovers are bad. I just know that they're a huge risk, and therefore we shouldn't do it without considering all the risk factors. When we send a child to another person's home, we're basically entrusting that other home with their safety. And most of, like a lot of the cases that I was dealing with, it was a child who has slept over at a friend's or family member's home, and that's where they were abused. Someone had come to their home, that's where that child was abused. If you just have to look at that reel that you're talking about on Instagram, it's been viewed millions of times and had hundreds of thousands of comments, and how many people actually are saying they were abused at a sleepover, not just by friends, but by family, cousins, and relatives. And the reason for that is, and why I think it's about being age appropriate. I'm not saying that don't send your kids or don't have sleepovers, but consider the risks. And the risks are that, your child might not feel confident or comfortable speaking up at that house and saying no to someone who's come into the bedroom or is trying to harm them. There's a differing values and belief systems at different homes. Even just going to a grandparent's house, our grandparents, I don't know what my mum and my child's grandparents are, but they would let them do some things that we were never allowed to do. There's differing values, like using their devices late at night or having no restrictions on them, right? And our children being exposed to content that they shouldn't see whilst they're there. There's also the fact is that there's older siblings sometimes around, and a lot of those comments in those in that reel is about, being abused by an older sibling or an older person at that home, which was still a child. Even to the point of children harming each other at sleepovers. There's a lot of risks. Where are they sleeping? Who's supervising them? Are you just allowing them to have free-for-all with no supervision at all, no one checking in on them, and they can do whatever they want? Or is there going to be some form of supervision, some guidelines where, where they're sleeping is going to be in an area that, everyone's going to be safe? Are we cutting, when they go to sleep shorter and saying, hey, it's time to go to bed now, everyone's devices come away? I was on talking about this on a TV show a couple of months, or last month anyway, and I said, I was that parent who told every other parent, hey, I take the devices away at 8 p.m. They're allowed to ring you if they need to, and I'm never going to stop them from coming home. I will never, if they want to, they're just going to have to come and tell me that they want to go home or that they need their device to ring you. But they're not going to have them after 8 p.m. because that's my rules in my home. If you're not comfortable with that, then that's okay. So, and that's just because I knew that, nothing happens great when kids have unrestricted access to everything, and so we just have to have some rules and guidelines. I'm not saying don't, I'm just saying be very mindful about the fact our kids are at risk, and kids are at risk in our own homes, and we need to take full responsibility for that.
Yeah, I agree. The risk factors, know who's going to be at the house. But like you said, it makes me think back to my own sleepovers. I was sleeping over at other people's homes and kind of the things that happened. And like it's even at later ages, it's like you say you're sleeping over, but you're heading out and going somewhere else because
Partying.
their parent is offering less supervision than yours, right? Or whatever the case may be. Yeah. Is there an age that you think that it's more appropriate?
Look, I hate to tell any parent how to parent because I know that, but I think it's something that each family has to consider. Are you willing to risk your child's safety in another person's home? Are you willing to risk? I get such a shock when I hear of parents who don't even don't even check where they are. Like they don't check who the parent is or the adult is in the home or who's going to be there. They just drop the kids off and take off like, and I just think I guess what I would love parents to understand is if you knew what I knew and you saw what I saw and the damage and devastation that child sexual abuse does to children and their whole lives. We've got research that shows that people who have been sexually abused literally die younger than people who haven't. We have an increase. We have research that shows that a victim of child sexual abuse has a 5 times higher rate of drug and alcohol addiction or substance abuse usage, 13 times more likely to take their own life or self-harm. We've got so much research that shows child sexual abuse can literally devastate a family, devastate a home, devastate a child. And we don't want to risk that on just a couple. And we can make alternative arrangements, like the fact that we could say and I don't know what the term is. Maybe you've heard the term, but when you just pick your kids up at like 10 o'clock and then you take them home and they don't have a sleepover, but they have like a stay late or something. Can't remember what the term is.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Ways to do it.
Yeah. We thought about, because there's another friends of ours that are committed to like no sleepovers either. And our sons are very good friends. And we said, well, we could just have a night where we play movies and we have popcorn and we all stay up, but then we just go home, or, like we just leave the house and we all go home together. And, that's the way we're going to do it. And so I think maybe, just kind of aligning, and I tell other people that as well, nope, we don't do sleepovers and, this is why, or I don't go into it. And I just feel like it's my prerogative. And I feel like a lot of people actually, I don't know, do you feel like people are doing less sleepovers these days? Or do you think, it kind of feels like that's what's happening.
Yeah, but there is a lot of pressure from those kids and parents that think it's okay. Like they've got no trauma around it, or they've got no education around it, or there is a lot of pressure for kids some days. I know when my daughter was younger, she would be pressured like, come on, why won't your mum let you? And I would literally have to find. I had all of the research and the statistics and the hard thing is it's not about the other people. It's not yet. My daughter has had sleepovers and she has gone on camps and she has done things, but it was not yet. It's our family's decision not to do this yet. Sorry, but I know that doesn't fit with your family's choices and values, but this is our decision. So, when it's not about you, it's about your family's choices and beliefs, then you can use that. It's a sort of like company versus small solo entrepreneur sort of thing. When you're a big company, you can make all the decisions. So, use your family. Like as a family, we've made this decision. It could be a family of 3, but as a family, we've made this decision versus, oh no, mum said no.
Yes, yes. And that is it's just arming with that verbiage for people to use, for parents to use so they don't feel uncomfortable too. I mean, really, that's kind of what it's all about. And you're right. Sometimes people get peer pressured into it and feel like, oh, well, everyone else's kids are doing it or whatever. But, you have your distinct rules for your household and that's what you roll with.
Yeah. And literally the first job out of the academy. So I just finished in the police academy and I had like the first week, one of the first jobs that I had was to go and be the first responder of a young girl who was only 11 who'd been at a sleepover. And she was there at her best friend's house and the parents had some people over. Everyone was drinking. It was like a party. And whilst she was asleep, someone entered the room and sexually abused her. That was like in the first week of my career. And, that for me is not, it's not something that happens every day, but who's to say if we don't know who's going to be there and they don't have the same rules, the same values, the same respect around body safety, bodily autonomy, a child's right to say no, then how can we be sure that they're a safe home for our kids to be at? So the other thing that I would say is that, get to know the people your children are spending time with. We don't just dump and run, hey, thanks for having my kid overnight, because we just don't know. And our kids, it's not their responsibility to prevent child sexual abuse. It's not their responsibility to fight off someone who doesn't care what your kid says. So, I think it's really important to take the time to get to know the families, to get to know the people, be around like-minded people like yourself.
That's such great advice. This is an interesting topic. How do predators groom children and their parents? How does someone groom the parents? I find that maybe we could come up with ideas of how someone could groom a child, but grooming the actual parents, can you go into this in greater detail?
Yeah. So, I mean, we see it all the time, right? Where when they are it's sometimes because they put themselves in positions of power and authority over like communities. We look at the teachers or the coaches or the people like that, or in a family situation where they're the patriarch of the family or the matriarch of the family. So it's sort of like it's not just that, it's that nice friend that's always around, that's always offering help, that's always making you feel really heard, seen, etc. Have you heard the term love bombing?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So
something like a narcissist would do, right?
Yeah. So they love bomb. They love bomb the child to groom them, to prepare them for abuse, but they also love bomb the families. And then they will be like that best mate, that friend, that confidant, that person that you can rely on. But then what they do is whilst they're grooming the child and they're grooming the parents, they're basically putting a wedge between the two of them. So if you're a safe parent and you have a very awesome relationship with your child and you're having those conversations, what they do is they put a wedge between you so that whilst they're grooming the child, they're giving them things, they're doing things behind your back that might make the child feel like they can't come to you. For instance, they might give them gifts or let them watch things that they wouldn't be allowed to watch, or they might talk to them about topics that they're not appropriate to talk about. And so they're basically making the child think, oh, wow, this person gets me. They treat me like an adult. They treat me older than I am. But in the meantime, that your child or the child can't come to the parents about that because this is stuff my parents wouldn't allow. So that's how they put a wedge between. But then in the meantime, they might be over here talking to the parents about how great your child, like I'm just going to choose a child's name, Billy, right? How great Billy is, but he needs to work on it. I've seen him, he's told me a few white lies and he's made me, I think that he really needs to be, mentored or whatever. And you're creating a wedge between them. So the parents think that the child is doing the wrong thing and this person's here to help and this person's, doing all of this to help the family, have a better relationship or whatever. But meanwhile, they've put a wedge in between both. The family or the parent thinks that the child's, off the rails or lying or whatever. And then the child's got all of this stuff going on that they can't actually say to the parent. And if they do speak up, the parent's going to naturally assume they're making it up. So The
Wow.
grooming is it's on two separate ways, it's on two separate planes, but in the whole purpose is to separate and break up that relationship between child and parent.
Wow. Just planting that seed and pitting them against each other. That's wild.
Yep.
Wow.
And it happens so regularly. And, the thing is that, that's with a good family, with a family that, listen and talk and have these conversations. But then you have the parent that is, maybe there's got some mental health struggles, or maybe they're going through some personal health struggles, or they're a separated family that, mum and dad don't live together anymore, but there's two homes, or that makes it even easier for kids to be pitted against or to have this happen, or, someone else comes into the relationship, and it makes it really easy for that. So there's many factors to it, but it's pretty much always the same way.
Wow. Of all the abuse of someone that is outside the family, is it a typical role that someone is playing, like a coach? Or did you see anything that was really prevalent as far as the type of individual?
No. One of the things I noticed was that they were always like a pillar of the community. You know what I mean? Like they always were like someone that everyone looked up to. I've seen child sex offenders, their teachers, religious heads of churches, I've seen them coaches, I've seen early childhood educators, I've seen everything. So it's not one type of career that they take on. It's whatever they want to, but it's always like we have some research that came out this year in Australia that said that they were 3 times more likely to work with children if they had an attraction to children. So they put themselves in those positions to be close to kids.
Yes.
So yeah.
I feel like in the news, you see this and it's someone who worked at a school and, how did we let this happen? As kind of like what's always going through my head, but they're probably masters at getting access, right?
Yes, 100%.
How would you, what are some red flags of predatory behavior of adults around kids? Are there any red flags that you can say we should just look out for?
Yeah. So one of the things, I heard an FBI profiler say this, is that if someone wants to spend more time with your child than you do, then that's a red flag. Anyone who finds ways to get alone with your child, I always found it strange. I'm not sure what it's like over where you are, but, my daughter played sports. She had music lessons. She's, done all of these extracurriculars. It's not like I stopped her from doing anything. She did everything she wanted to do, but I was always there. I always made sure I was there, or an adult was with her. She wasn't off behind closed doors with someone. So, for me, I saw a lot of people when they groom children to be behind closed doors. Finding a way to get children alone, finding a way to get children behind a closed door, finding a way to get children semi-nude or nude. So, for instance, especially with little toddlers and kids, baths in the middle of the day, running around the backyard under the hose, that sort of thing. And then, for no apparent reason, touching children, obviously, where they're not meant to, not taking no for an answer. So, for instance, the tickling thing. A lot of predators and groomers will use tickling as a way to, to get children used to being touched by them. And so one of the things that I was really strong about was like, if a child says no, you have to stop. We have to, as adults and parents, model consent. And if our children say no, we need to stop. And we need to then have a conversation about, whether, for instance, my daughter would say, stop it, I don't like it, when she was really little. But then when she got to a certain age, she would say, I don't give consent for you to tickle me. And it was, around 10 that she started using the word, I don't give you consent.
Yeah.
And that was because mum was talking about consent about that time.
Yeah, of course. But how great.
Yeah. It stops people in their tracks when they use the actual word consent. I didn't give you consent. But, those sorts of things. And when they get a bit older and they've got a device, it might be sending messages. I never felt really comfortable with adults having communication with kids because we just don't know. And if the parent isn't involved in the communication, so like sporting group chats, for instance, or team group chats where you might have the coach and all the kids and they're talking about, when things are and where to be and stuff like that. I think adults should be involved in those chats because, we just don't know. We just don't know. And
yes.
So there's quite a few things there. And I mean, I list them off in my book, but, behind closed doors, wanting to spend more time, that it's about availability. When they can be around your child on their own. So how do we, ensure that they're not? If I was personally, I taught netball for a while for my daughter's netball, and I was the coach. So I would make sure all the parents were in the group chat. I consider myself a safe adult. All parents were in the group chat, and that. I never made sure that if I had to have a conversation or I was taking kids home, it was always with my child in the car, and a lot of, everyone knew when and where I was picking and dropping them off. Everyone was aware, and I had permission from every parent, just making sure I was ticking all boxes, just to be sure and just to be a safe adult, and modeling that to those kids who were in my team. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And being a great example. I'm sure everybody trusts their child with you, though. Do you get that where you're like, oh, it's fine if they go to your house, right?
Well, yeah, but you know what? Like, I mean, it's I don't take that for granted though. Like I did a presentation at a school, and I had like this young man, he was nearly an adult, and he had autism, and he was so beautiful and helpful, and he wanted to like tell me how great he thought I was and everything. But then he went to give me his mobile number. He's like, here's my mobile number. If you ever need help, I would really like you to like ask me. And I said to him, you know what, mate, like, and sorry about the mate, because that's a very Australianism.
No, I love it. I love it.
I said, you know what, mate, I wouldn't be a safe adult if I took your number, because I'm an adult and you're still a child, even though you're close to being an adult. And we shouldn't give our numbers out to people we don't know in real life. And we don't know each other properly yet. You've only just met me. So that's not really a safe thing to do, don't you think? And he was, thought on it for a second and goes, yeah, you're right. And I said, so, just be mindful who we give our numbers out to, because we don't want to be taken for, you take them for granted, or, someone abuse that power. So I just want you to just think about this next time before you give out.
Oh, I love that. You taught him something so important in that moment.
Yeah.
And if we all would just do that. Yeah. Like, and realize the boundary between an adult and a child. And you may think you're coming from a good place, but, keeping those boundaries helps them in the long run understand those types of relationships and maybe where it could get, out of hand.
Yeah. And modeling safe relationships and modeling just how parents and adults should act and behave, like we shouldn't be, especially when it's not our family or our children, we shouldn't, be talking certain ways to kids, and we shouldn't be, over explaining or oversharing. However, in saying that, my daughter has had kids who have come to me and said, Kristi, I don't know who to talk to about this. So, that's also a big, that's also an honor to be that safe adult that they all come to. But, I have always, especially in the younger years, not so much now that my daughter's nearly an adult, but in the younger years, I used to go and tell their parents, hey, by the way, the kids were asking me about this today, and I hope you don't mind, but I've told them I didn't want them to not have this information because it's really important, because every little bit of information I could give kids around me might have protected them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you about your dinner table test. Can you tell us what that is?
I think it's quite cool because, so the dinner table test is basically, so if you have a public or a private account, it depends on who you are. But for instance, if you wouldn't have the people that follow you on social media, if you wouldn't have them at your dinner table, why are we sharing our kids' photos with them, basically? So my thought process around that is I used to have thousands of people in my private Facebook, and I've now only got 300 and something. I've culled it down to like literally the people I know and the people I would sit around a dinner table with and have a meal with. And they're the only ones who get access to my family and my family's photos. The rest of the time, which is my public platform, there's close to 190 or something thousand people on there. My daughter's photo, other than one photo which she gave me permission to share, is the only photo that's ever been shared on there. So, that the reason for that is because I don't know what anyone will do with that photo. I don't know, there is cases of child stalking. There is cases of people using social media photos of kids to create artificial intelligence, child abuse material. There's, we just don't know it. And from my experience in the police, I know that child sex offenders love to collect photos of kids, and they will collect them from wherever they see them and find them. So I'm really mindful that it's really about who we trust, and it's not my decision to share those photos. So I've always, and for years now, asked my daughter, is it okay if I share this photo with my private Facebook or my private whatever? I send photos direct to people if I want them to see something. I don't send them, and it's only for those people who would sit around a dinner table and have a meal with me.
I really love that. And I think it made me think twice, hearing about that. And I like that rule a lot. I think we should all just think about that a little bit more before we put something out there. Go ahead.
Yeah. I've had kids come up to me, like 8 and 9-year-olds, ask me, how do I get my mum to stop posting photos of me?
Wow.
I don't, because we're teaching them cyber safety and online safety. And we tell them not to share their information, yet they don't know all of our friends and they don't know all of the people in our lives. We just go about our day not even thinking about the fact that we're teaching them safety and yet posting their photos to people they don't know. So
Absolutely.
I have had 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds ask me that. And, and also when we're thinking about consent, one of the other things that I teach young people is, asking their friends if it's okay to take a photo of them. Hey, is it okay if I take a photo? Is it okay if I post it on my Snapchat, my Instagram, wherever? And if we're expecting kids to ask for consent, why are we not asking for consent? We just don't know why or where those photos will go. And when I joined Facebook in 2007, I had no idea that we would be where we are right now in 2025, where we don't have we don't own those photos once they're posted. They belong to Meta. They belong to wherever they go, in whichever way. So we don't own them, and they can do whatever they want with them. We need to be mindful that we're not setting our children up for failure, and we're giving them, we can't be we can't be a hypocrite either.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. But if you really think about it, I think it's become so second nature for so many people that we just don't consider that. Sometimes I won't tag people in photos because I think, they might not want to be on that or whatever. And, I love that, asking for consent and modeling that for our kids and showing them that it doesn't mean when you're out in public that it's just willy nilly and someone can do anything. They can take a photo. They can do this, do that. No, like we should be asking each other for consent. I really appreciate that thought of yours. I want to know, okay. So we were kind of talking about understanding your own childhood trauma and what triggers you before you have a child, right? Yeah. And how important this really is. And I think anyone who has had a child and maybe didn't think they had endured any childhood trauma, and then you have a child and it kind of hits you like a ton of bricks. I'm sure there's people out there that can relate to that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I just know from my own experience, but from all of the families and the people I've worked with over this journey, is that, most of the time we don't pay attention to the trauma until our kids turn up. We don't think about it. We think we've dealt with it, or that was when I was a kid. I'm over that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what I noticed was, and what I've seen is that a lot of the time, if you're a victim survivor of any kind of trauma, but especially child sexual abuse, you might have suppressed and repressed those memories. And then all of a sudden your child is born, or your child hits the age you were when your abuse started. And those memories pop up and they come out of nowhere. And what we know is that, trauma creates, our window of tolerance. So, the things that we might be able to cope with and deal with and handle get smaller and smaller and smaller as our trauma is more, in our face, or making itself known, so to speak. So then we are maybe, yelling at the kids more. We might be not getting along with our partner anymore, or we might be struggling to just process everything. We might have a really small window of tolerance that we are literally just losing it. And it's because that repressed and that trauma that's there is basically taking up a lot of space. And it's making it so much harder for us to be really good parents. And so I know from my experience, when my daughter hit 7, my trauma popped up. When my daughter hit 12, my trauma popped up. When my daughter hit 15, my trauma popped up. So don't underestimate it, because it's going to show itself when you least expect it. You'll think you've dealt with it, and then you're not parenting as best as you wanted.
Oh, gosh. That's interesting. I never really thought about, I kind of thought about like when you have a child, you realize kind of all these things, but gosh, at different ages. So it could continue on.
It does.
Years from now.
It depends on the person, but my trauma, like I had different traumatic events over those years. And so every time it wasn't until I think my daughter hit, 13 or something. And I was like, oh, that's why I've been screaming for a year and not coping. Like I'm going to be really real. I might know all this stuff, but when it's you going through it, sometimes you just don't notice it. So it took me a long time to realize that all of these traumatic events were causing this. And I've had victim survivors come to me and say, I didn't remember anything. And then my child, I didn't remember anything. And then now it's all coming back up and I don't know what to do with it. And I'm like, have you got a child? And they'll be like, yes. And I'm like, what age is your child? And they're like, 3. And I'm like, okay, did it pop up when your child was born, or has it popped up now? And usually it started when the child was born, stuff started coming up, and then boom, when they hit the age that they were when they were first abused, that's when it really makes itself known. So I don't know if there's any research on this. I'd love to hear from someone if there is, because this is what I've observed in people, and I've spoken to thousands of them. So,
Yeah, well, it's very, very interesting. And I think very poignant for us all to think about, online safety tips. I know we were kind of talking about the online before. I want to backtrack to that. Are there any particular tips for online safety? I know right now, boys in the online chats for video games, obviously, there's a lot of different scenarios, but if you have any good tips for us.
Yeah, I guess the best tips for me from my perspective is to, first of all, make sure you know what your children are on, what gaming they're doing, what platforms they're on, and what games they have, or what social media apps they have. In Australia, we're actually getting a social media ban, which is going to be quite interesting when it comes to effect. They're banning social media for kids under the age of 16 as of next year. So I see that as both good. We still need to obviously educate young people on, cyber safety and digital literacy, because it's their everyday world. But, from my perspective, I think, and even from the young people I speak to, they think it's a good thing because they wish that they had more of a childhood. The younger our kids are online, the harder it is for them to switch off and to decompress and to get away from all of that. There's a lot of cyberbullying, a lot of online bullying, a lot of online grooming. So the best way to know or to find out is obviously have conversations with your kids around online safety, online grooming, how to identify, those body safety lessons that I was talking about, they beautifully convert over to online safety lessons as well. So if you start with body safety when they're little, you can then move them over to online safety. Some of the conversations I had with my own daughter around 9-10 years old was, have any of your friends ever been asked for a photo of their private parts online? I didn't ask her if she'd been asked for a photo. I asked if any of her friends had been asked. Because then I was not focusing on her so much and what she was doing online. I was focusing on what she knew about this topic. And then we can have those conversations like, well, if anyone asked you to send a photo of your privates, what would you do? And then I'm giving her that next step was, oh, well, okay, so that's happened to your friend. Well, what would you do if someone did that? And then we're doing kind of like I did in the police scenario training, where we're training them what to do next. If anyone ever asked you to go from Roblox onto a private messaging board or Discord or Kik or a Snapchat or something, well, what would you do? Oh, well, why would that happen? Oh, well, because, that's what some people who don't, people who want to harm kids, they want you to go from where you're in a group to being on your own with them. So,
again, always trying to get them alone.
Yeah, get them alone, away from, it's similar to a closed door scenario, right? We talk about, if any adults or any person ever wants to be with you behind a closed door, and that's kids as well, right? But we can talk about that in regards to online safety. And, some of those conversations are really simple to have if you've already had that conversation with them about, appropriate, inappropriate, safe and unsafe behaviors. And then also with regards to, if anyone ever, and it's funny because there used to be this thing where predators would ask for foot photos of kids' feet, and that was how they groomed them, but it's not so much anymore. I don't think they do that as much anymore, but that was when my daughter was a young person, that was what they were using. So just being, following Instagram pages like, what's the one that I really like? I'm just trying to think. I'll come back to it because it'll pop into my head. But, there's some really great people out there who, and especially in the US, who are basically like bark and, don't you hate that when you can't think of them? Anyway,
you'll think of it right after we get off too.
Probably. Her name is Nikki, Scrolling to Death. So
Scrolling to Death.
Yeah, Nikki is from Scrolling to Death, and she does all of these amazing parent awareness videos and a podcast about, what apps are doing, where they're grooming kids, how to, keep your kids safe. But I think it's having that open line of communication. Some of the other tips I had was when my daughter was online gaming, I would be like, okay, no headphones.
Oh yeah.
I want to hear the whole thing, even all of the swearing that young kids do, because I think because I think they're cool online and all of that. I don't care about that. I'm not here for that. I just want to hear that there's no adults in the conversation. There's no grooming happening, so my daughter was only allowed to online game with friends and stuff if I could hear the conversations. And so I would just have to get over myself about the swearing and stuff like that and let it go because, they drop all sorts of words when they think no one's listening. So, but that was more so just to make it more an open door policy so that I could bring up if something came up or if I heard some bullying, for instance, I'd be like, hey, I heard that how they were talking, are you okay? Do you want to talk about that? Is there anything we can do? Is there any way we can maybe nip this in the bud? That kind of thing. And just being aware, like where they are. My last tip would be to play it with them now and again. Sit next to them, play the game. I hated Roblox. I played it. I hated Fortnite. I played it because I was so bad at it. But I sat there and I sat next to my child and I just was like, oh, so what's this do? Oh, if someone was like rude to you, especially when she was little, if someone did this, what would you do? How do you block and report someone on this app? Like, where do you go to, stop people from messaging you? Who's this person that you're talking to? So I was kind of just like, taking an interest in what she was doing, but also knowing that she was, she knew exactly how to get herself safe if she needed to.
I love that. I love that, Kristi. You're such a wealth of information and tips. And even though this feels like not my typical subject matter in a way, I do think it's very health and wellness related, and that this is information that we need to be armed with, and so I'm so thankful that you're here. I did want to mention one last thing to wrap up, because you and I have a commonality of being alcohol free.
Yes.
And so if you want to talk about your journey a little bit.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I come from a family history of alcohol and substance abuse. So I guess I was always very aware of alcohol and alcoholism. But what I did notice is that when I left the police and I had PTSD, that I would go through these like downward spirals into depression, and when I really sat with it, it coincided with when I drank. So I would have a couple of drinks on a weekend, and I was never a big drinker ever, but I'd have a couple of drinks on the weekend, and then I would spend all week depressed. And then I would start lifting up, my mood would start lifting, and then I would have another couple of drinks on the weekend, because that's what you do when you're having dinner with family or friends or whatever. And so it took me, I'm sad to say that it took me a long time to realize that pattern. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering why I felt so depressed all the time. And, obviously having PTSD from the police, I didn't mention that at the start, but yeah, I left with post-traumatic stress disorder and severe anxiety, and which then turned into the depression. But at the minute I stopped drinking, my mood and everything got better, and my depression was easier to manage, and I didn't even have to personally, I didn't use any SSRI drugs or any antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds. It was all managed through supplements and health and exercise and stuff like that. But it was the moment, it kind of really made me realize that, well, it's a depressant, isn't it? Alcohol is a depressant, and it can really, and for someone with my, obviously I have what they can consider in some cases a brain injury now because of what I've been, the vicarious trauma. But yeah, it really affected my moods, and it really affected my parenting. It affected my health. It affected everything.
Yeah.
That's hence why I went alcohol free. I have been known to have the 1 or 2 drinks a year, but, usually I go, why did I do that to myself? So,
right. No, I think it's still, you're still considered alcohol free, right? It's, sometimes we think, oh, we could add that back in, but I can relate to what you're saying. And completely agree with you that the alcohol heightens the anxiety and those feelings, they just get amped up with that. And it's usually the aftermath of it, the days after, you're like, oh, this just doesn't feel right. And I kind of did the same thing. I would have some on the weekend, and then all week I would be shameful about it. If I felt guilty, I didn't feel good, and then just repeat the cycle over and over. And it took me a while too. It took me a while. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast, but I always like to kind of mention it when I know someone has mentioned it to me. I like to bring it up.
Yeah, it didn't. It's really strange that, well, for me, it was like, Australians have a very big drinking culture, and it's very normal for everyone to sit around and have drinks everywhere you go. And so we, it's just normal. And so when you stop drinking in Australia, everyone's like, what's going on? What's happening? Why aren't you drinking? Oh, you can just have one. So it can be really hard to give up in Australia. But we, I think it's getting better. A lot of people are realizing that alcohol is just such have such a really bad reaction to some people, and I'm definitely one of those people. And it just made me really miserable and made me not the greatest person to be around. So I'm glad that I realized it, because I don't think I would have liked me when I was drinking either.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, good for you. Good for you. Is there anything you want to leave the Cinnamon Effect audience with before we go?
it's never too late to start having conversations with your kids. You can start at any age. It doesn't mean, yes, I started at 2, but I became a police officer when my daughter was 2. I'd imagine if I hadn't have learned what I learned, I wouldn't have been having these conversations. So you can start at any age. The way I would start it is just say, hey, I didn't realize that I hadn't, we hadn't had this conversation, and I just realized how important it is. Or, hey, I think I stuffed up and didn't tell you some stuff that you need to know, or, whatever. Take some responsibility for not having the conversation first or earlier, and just say, hey, no one ever talked about it with me when I was a kid. I grew up with no one telling me about this stuff. And I don't want that to be us. I want us to do it differently, because I know that this is important.
Yeah. Such great information. Kristi McVee, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Australia. Now you can go to bed.
I'm going to finish my cup of tea and go to bed.
I know. Now tell me, how can everyone find you on Instagram, maybe your website? What would you like to shout out?
Yeah, so Kristi McVee on Instagram, TikTok, Cop81 on TikTok, funny enough.
Okay.
And my website is cape-au.com. But you can put that in the show notes, so that will be easy to find.
Perfect. I will do that. Kristi McVee, thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Cinnamon Effect. If you enjoyed our time together, don't forget to hit that follow button on your podcast app and sprinkle a little love by leaving us a 5-star rating and a quick review. Your support means the world to me. For even more goodness, check out the show notes where you'll find links to some of my favorite products. And don't forget to visit thecinnamoneffect.com to connect with me directly or to grab your TCE gratitude journal, your next step towards a more grateful life. I can't wait to spice things up with you again next time. Stay vibrant, stay inspired, and remember to add a little cinnamon to your life every day.